welcome to Short on Short's Collaborator's review series focusing on short-form content. My name is Isaac Simpson. I'm the senior content editor of Colaborator.com. I'm here with my co-hosts, screenwriter Kevin Allen Jackson, costume designer Maria Perry, and our guest for today, filmmaker Toby Louie. Thank you for coming.
You're welcome. It's good to be here.
As always on the show, we review 4 short-form films, and we might as well just delve right into it. Today we're going to start with a film called The Muse, which was Maria's pick, which as always has a sci-fi bent in it. It was directed by Tim Walker, and it was written by Mia Bays, Simone Glover, and Tim Walker also. And it's starring Kristen McMenemy and Ben Whishaw. Ben Whishaw is a very famous actor. He plays Q in the new James Bond movies, amongst other things. And Tim Walker is actually a famous fashion photographer, which I found out.
And Kim is a model, I think, also.
Yeah, Kim is, I think, his muse, which is kind of, or somebody involves. Yeah, I think it's Tim Walker's muse is the lead actress. So I'm just going to spoil it for you. There's kind of a mermaid thing going on in this sci-fi film, and the question that I have is, so was the mermaid real, or was the mermaid an actress mermaid?
No, I think she was supposed to be a real mermaid. I think the question is, where's the sci-fi in this film?
I think that we, because we're not the sci-fi experts that you are, that anything that isn't real, we just use sci-fi as a catch-all.
Okay, well, a mermaid is a fantasy creature.
It's more of a fantasy.
Okay, that's a fair point. Did you think the mermaid was real?
I thought it was part of his imagination. I mean, what's interesting about this short, actually, I don't know that I would have totally gotten it if I didn't know what the title was, because I feel like that played so much into the actual short. But I thought it was an interesting mystery and character piece, but it was hard for me to know whether she was real or not. I don't know that I deciphered that.
I didn't think that that's at least for me. I mean, now that you mention it, I'm like, oh yeah, was she real or not? But for me, the star of this movie was the cinematography and the production design. It was, every single frame of this movie was like the most beautiful photograph you've ever seen in your life.
Absolutely, and there's something that really works with mermaids in 1930s or whatever. That time, it really kind of like matches well. The thing, though, in researching this film that I discovered is that it's not supposed to be a real mermaid. It's supposed to be, he is a filmmaker, and the mermaid, that was his girlfriend playing the mermaid.
Yeah, that didn't really translate.
Who said that? The filmmakers?
The synopsis on IMDb.
Really?
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
I didn't pick that up at all either.
I think because it's so minimal, like you don't have any talking for like the
Right,
first half of the short. It's kind of nice that you can just kind of come in and go, oh no, that's totally a mermaid. I thought it was a mermaid.
Yeah. See, the funny thing is that, I kept expecting it to be about an artist and its muse. And that's definitely there. We're inside what's obviously some sort of photography or artist studio inside this beautiful house. And obviously he's using cameras throughout and things like that. But I didn't really think that that's ultimately what it was about. I thought to me, it was more a movie about what happens when you trap the thing that you love, right? And how that ultimately will always lead it to just going away.
Which I agree with.
But I think that the thing that he loved was this form of inspiration or whatever it was. And what I loved about, going back to what you were saying about how it was shot, they used so many different mediums like within the frame.
Right.
And I thought that was really cool, and the way that they were shooting the screen and photographs, and they manipulated that a lot. And I think that was kind of the artist within the artist within the within the movie.
So it was very meta in that sense.
Yeah,
well,
it was a little bit.
Also, if she's not supposed to be a real mermaid, then kind of the idea of him loving her as a mermaid is like putting a chick up on a pedestal, and that once it's gone, you lose them.
And he couldn't love her for who she really was, kind of. He could only love her as the mermaid.
See, I feel like that's one interpretation we could go with. Too.
Yeah.
Right. I think what you're saying, Toby, though, is really interesting, that he fell in love with the idea of the inspiration, and he tried to hold on to it too tightly, and he lost it. And that, when you look at it from that perspective, anybody who's ever tried to do anything creative can certainly relate to that, can relate to the idea of getting that burst of inspiration and being like, oh my God, I've got to hold on to this forever. And it never works that way.
No.
It
changes and
evolves. It changes and it
yeah.
goes away and it comes back in a different form. And so I think that's actually probably pretty close to what they intended. That makes so much sense.
One problem that I had, though, was that if it's supposed to be, I mean, it's great as a tone poem and it's visually amazing, but if it's supposed to be not a real mermaid and he's supposed to be a filmmaker, why does his entire movie about the mermaid only have one scene in it in which she's in?
I think it's really about his depression. Like his psyche, it's like, what is my life now? It's gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
I thought it was going to end with cutting to her outside the water box thing.
Well, spoilers, Ben Whishaw is in this movie. He's going to die. That's how it works. Like, Ben Whishaw dies in everything he's in.
He's just so...
Now, is he the reason
so,
you
like,
picked this
sad.
movie, by the
He
way?
is. I will watch anything Ben
Yeah, so how
Whishaw
did you
is in.
find this? I'm curious.
I love Ben Whishaw. Like, I will watch anything he's in. I heard when they were filming this, like, a year and more ago. And they just finally put it up in a way I could get my hands on it. So I was like, yes.
Cool.
Now, who's the director again?
Tim Walker, who's a big fashion photographer.
Well, God, I hope he does more stuff, because
Yeah.
this is just a beautiful movie.
Yeah. A lot of times fashion photographers make very beautiful short films, but in a
Right.
larger, expanded sense, maybe it's not
Well,
the same.
who knows? I mean, he certainly did a really good job of making a beautiful,
Very beautiful. Yeah, I agree.
a beautiful
Very striking.
and compelling, if not necessarily entirely cohesive, short film.
Right.
Yeah.
It was a little more experimental in nature. I think that, and that's, when you evaluate a short film, it's kind of like what your expectations are going into it. And I don't know that it totally satisfied all. Like I actually didn't love it. I thought that, like you were saying, it was beautiful and the imagery was great, but I didn't feel like it was. And I don't know if we're supposed to critique these things, but I just didn't think that it was, a full story, and it was more experimental, which isn't a bad thing, but it didn't grip me the way that some other shorts.
It's such an interesting. I'm so glad you brought that up, because it's this never-ending debate and question about short film, right? Is it okay because it's a piece of short-form content for it not to be a complete story, for it just to be, like you called it, a tone poem, or just some sort of slice of life, or just an idea? I've seen so many short films that are just that. Right. They're just, okay, we have this cool idea and let's explore that in 4 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever.
Kubrick would say to that even long movies are just that. I mean, they're basically lengthy tone poems. He says it should just be a shifting, revolving door of feelings and emotions and the story comes later, right?
Yeah, but that's all well and good that he thought that, but he somehow managed to weave a story into every single one of those.
Okay. So before we move on, actually, and this is a good transition, is that this film was available on a site called We Are Colony, which holds itself out as a Netflix for independent film. So you can rent this movie on there, which is, I think, what you did, correct? So how much did it cost to rent this on there?
I think this one was like $3, $2.99.
Okay. All right. So several of the films we're reviewing today are available online, but they're available through digital rentals. And that's, I guess, a category that we're going to embrace, and we hope to see more of these movies making a little bit of money.
Well, that's the thing too. Is I feel like the short format is so hard to make money. I mean, I've made short films in the past, and it's so hard to get investors on board because they're not really investors. They're giving you money to make something, and they're not going to see a return on their dollar. So I think it is cool that some of these platforms are starting to emerge where
you can get a little bit of money.
Yeah, you can buy it.
Yeah.
Whether you're actually making money or not is kind of irrelevant, but actually there's revenue to be had. I think that's cool.
Well, and I was saying this before, why shouldn't somebody get 99 cents or $2 or whatever? I mean, everyone can afford that. I mean, it's not an imposition on anybody. And why shouldn't someone get compensated for all their time and hard work and skill?
Yeah, so we should just then go into Toby's pick, which is My Father's Truck, which was available on Vimeo Shorts.
And that was a little bit more expensive. It was.
So how much was that? To buy?
What did you say yours was?
$2.99.
Yeah, mine was $4.99.
$4.99.
Or it was $3.99. It was $4 something. Yeah.
So that's a pretty high price to pay for.
But I think that was because I bought it. You can rent it for a little less, but
Interesting.
then you only get like a certain number of viewings.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So My Father's Truck, the movie that we're talking about, is written and directed by Mauricio Osaki, and it's starring Chung An and Mai V. It takes place in Vietnam, but Osaki is actually a Japanese-Brazilian filmmaker. And the way it got made was he was in NYU Asia, and this was his thesis. So that he went over to Vietnam and shot it. It debuted at the Berlin Film Festival in 2014 and was on the short list for Oscars in 2014 as well. The reason why we're reviewing it is because it just became available on Vimeo Shorts for this low price. And originally it was meant to be a boy, and then he interviewed a bunch of boys or auditioned a bunch of boys, and he didn't like any of them, so he found this girl who was like a street vendor's daughter. So what did you think of her? Did you think
I thought she was fantastic.
Yeah, I mean this is another movie that was also very beautiful. It was very well shot, very well put together. But for me, the stars were the stars. The man and that girl are both amazing. And she's just one of those rare talents that you find every once in a while. And
it'd be curious to know if it translates past this, like if she actually becomes an actress because I'm sure that,
Right.
that's she, like you were saying, he found her, it would be interesting to see what happens.
Well, I
next.
certainly hope so, because she's certainly a special talent.
Yeah, she was great.
Absolutely. Just a really, it made me think of and I can't remember the name of the film that we reviewed a few shows back, where I made the comment about the child actors and how sometimes they drink. Drink. Okay, that's what it was called.
I thought you were saying the child actors drink.
No, the movie was called Drink.
They might be better.
This was the flip side of that. I don't know whether it was that this director is particularly skilled working with children, or if that little girl is just off the charts amazing, or probably a combination of the two.
Or the fact that it maybe spoke to her. It seemed so real to me. That's what I really loved about it, is that, and the reason I chose it was because I felt like it was that time where you go to work with your parents for the first time and you see them as real people. Right. And that, obviously, it's a very different circumstance because they're in Vietnam and it's, the countryside. But it's still the same idea that you're kind of witnessing your family in a different perspective than at home.
And what I loved about it too is that, and I'm not going to say because I don't want to give it away, but it sort of is rolling along as this, fairly compelling drama with really good acting. And then there's a really surprising thing that happens that, at least for me, I wasn't expecting that. That was very shocking.
I don't want to say it.
I don't want to say what it is, because I want people to have a similar, if they choose to watch this film, you have a similar reaction. And it's, anytime a film can do that, anytime a film can actually surprise you, that, at least for me, I think that's quite a feat.
But then we have nothing to talk about in the second half of this.
No, I think we have plenty to talk about. I will throw this out there. I don't have a lot of criticisms of this movie. I think it was shot really well. I think that the design overall was beautiful. The acting, as we mentioned, was great. And I think the story was pretty solid, and it was obviously directed very well. The only complaint I have about this movie is that there's this guy in the countryside, and he makes money by driving farmers around, right? That's his source of income. And his daughter loses all of his money, and he yells at her, and that's it. Can you imagine if all of a sudden you lost your entire week's paycheck?
I don't know if it was weeks. I think it was just a day.
But still.
He also secured another payment in a larger sum before,
he had some
before
shady
she
stuff.
lost
Well,
it.
that's what I thought was so interesting about it, was that there was this, she disappointed him, and then he disappointed her. And the fallout from him disappointing her is so much more, there's so much more gravity to it because,
No, absolutely.
just because of, I feel like if, as a parent, like that's way worse than your daughter or son disappointing.
No, absolutely. I'm just saying that like that was the only moment that didn't ring true to me.
Yeah, interesting.
Like if I'm a guy who's living basically hand to mouth, like these people obviously are, and somebody loses my entire day's pay, even if it's just a day, loses my entire day's pay, I'm gonna try to find it. I'm gonna try, something.
But
even though
you have a bigger paycheck sitting right there, like he got the job right before he found out she lost the pay. So
yeah, I kind of
I
agree
feel
with
like
Maria.
that's.
I don't know.
I would sit here and go, well, I'm still gonna walk away with more than I had.
Well,
So
see, now I
I'm not
guess
that
if we had
upset.
seen him make that decision, like, see, I agree with you, but it's an intellectualization that we're making. The actors didn't play that, right? He just got mad at his daughter, and then the movie and then it went on. If we had seen him have that moment of, well, you know what, I got this bigger job, screw it, right? Then I wouldn't have had an issue. But again, this is a very minor quibble.
Yeah, no. But I feel like to me that's more of like a plot shift that wasn't. The characters were, like you were saying, was so much stronger that the plot changes to me didn't bother me because it was overall it was a character piece and it was sort of interesting love story.
Yeah, and like you said, she disappointed him, and then he had to disappoint her. So I think that was sort of the shift that needed to happen. Moving on to our next film, Bouquet, which is directed, produced, written, and starring Anonymous, not the online hacker group, but actually anonymous people. And it's loosely adopted from a play called All Aboard the Marriage Hearse by Samuel French. The reason why I was interested in it, obviously, is because everybody is anonymous in this short, and it's part of a project called Takeaway Scenes, which is a little bit similar to Dogma 95, and it has a set of rules. One of those rules being that everyone in it has to be anonymous. The Dogma rule is that only the director has to be anonymous. Some of the other rules is that it has to be one take, there has to be natural lighting, 2 to 5 actors, no added music, meaning diegetic music is what that's called, so only natural music from the environment, and no credit for anybody.
Okay.
So it's an
I have to ask you a question though. Is the playwright's name really Samuel French, or is that who published it? Because Samuel French is a huge publisher for plays.
It may well be the name of the publisher. So
Okay.
we should find out who actually wrote this play, because it's probably
That would be
not
so
Samuel French.
coincidental and funny.
Yeah, that was a quick
Sure.
note.
I just,
that I wrote.
sorry,
It's fine.
I'm a theater geek.
You're
so-
right. Thanks for embarrassing me, Kevin. Anyway, moving on to whoever wrote this play. It's only loosely based on this play, not by Samuel French. So
That's interesting I thought that when you originally said that it was anonymous, that was the choice that they made to make this anonymous. Because it did feel like this could happen to anybody, and that's what I liked about it. But then that sounds like it's just the rules of the
project.
Yeah, of the project.
Well, their whole thing is that this is truth is the most important thing in filmmaking. So is this true filmmaking to you, Maria?
What does that mean? True filmmaking.
Yeah, exactly. What are you asking exactly?
I guess is making film in this way where there's no credit and everything's natural and the music and the light and everything is very natural. Is that more true? Is that more honest perhaps than other forms?
I mean, I don't think so. I mean, it's still kind of, it's scripted. It's still, you still have, this is what we have to achieve. It's not like you're going around being like, I got a camera behind my back and I'm just going to catch my friends. But I don't think there's I think there's a real life element to it, because this is very much highlighting there's no good way to do this. There's no right time to do. How do we even do this is basically the point of this film. But
it's about a proposal, a marriage proposal.
Right.
So that's what she said.
It's really weird. I mean, I didn't know any of that watching the film, right? But now that you tell me, it feels like the gag of it is more of a distraction from the film than if I just knew who the actors were. Because honestly, for me, in a short film, I don't look at the names of the actors anyway until maybe afterwards, right? So that's never a distraction to me anyway. But seeing Anonymous draws attention to them. So for at least for me, it sort of had the opposite effect from what you're explaining they intended. And I completely agree with Maria that, I mean, at the end of the day, this is still this artificial thing that they created. I thought on a lot of levels, it was incredibly well executed. But, it's still, I mean, it's no more true than any other really well-made film.
And the idea of having it be anonymous, especially in this day and age, like somebody posted on their Facebook, here's this thing I'm in. All you have to do is Google for that. And you'll be like, oh, that's the actress. Good job.
And I recognize that actor, too. It wouldn't take me too long to figure out who that was.
Yeah, I thought they did a pretty great job, the two actors. And I really was in the awkwardness of the marriage proposal. Mm-hmm. Did you think the marriage proposal was...
Well, it's funny. I jotted a note down after I watched it that it wasn't that well made, but I think because of all these things that we're talking about. But it wasn't that. Actually, it was. I did think the performances were sharp. I loved how it ended, and I thought that there were some interesting little twists and turns of the short. But what was your original question? Did I think it was a real marriage proposal?
Did you get caught up in the awkwardness of that?
Yeah. I think I got caught up more in the awkwardness of their relationship than it was in like the proposal, because I believed that it wasn't happening, was or was not happening.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that, this, especially given what you just told me, I have an even higher level of respect for how well they were able to accomplish it.
Yeah, natural light.
With those
knowing that, it's a different story.
It really is. I mean, because when I looked at this film, and especially juxtaposed to the other three films that we're talking about this week, it's certainly not photographed nearly as well, right? Except for the fact that the camera work, especially in the beginning, is pretty effective because they're drunk and it feels drunk, right? The camera work, that sort of shaky handheld thing that they have going, is very effective. It's certainly not as beautiful as the other films, but it was at least effective, right?
Well, what's interesting too is I feel like with those types of films, you're always waiting for something to happen. You're waiting for something bad to happen almost. And I feel like we've, as an audience, have become used to just wanting something bad to happen or thinking that something's bad. Like when I was watching Boyhood, it was the same way. It was that scene where they're all hanging out and they're high school kids and they're playing around. You think something bad's going to happen and nothing bad happens. And like I think just we are geared towards, as audience members, that's what we think all the time.
Well, sure.
What you mean when there's a handheld camera?
No, not just a handheld camera, but just the way that it was shot. The way in which it was shot. I thought that there was a robber inside the house.
Right.
I thought that there was something more like violent and destructive coming our way.
What does that come from?
I think it comes from just our saturation with what we watch.
And I think also when you have that sort of there's sort of a voyeuristic sort of feel to that sort of handheld camera work.
Yeah,
and that makes you feel, I mean, even if it's unconscious, it makes you feel like, oh, something bad is going to happen. Someone's watching them, and we're looking at things from the perspective of the person who's watching them. And that's a little uncomfortable. It makes you feel like, oh, something's going to jump out, or something bad's going to happen, or something like that.
I feel like part of it is, like you said, we watched all of these one after another probably.
Right.
And the others were so pretty, and that in comparison made this look like it was shot a little shoddier. And I think that's something that you come to expect from horror films. Like, just by default, they usually don't look as good as other movies.
They're done
and
more
so,
cheaply, for sure.
And that's just something that you end up kind of absorbing. So you're like, oh, it looks kind of cheap. Something horrible is going to happen.
Maybe, but Boyhood wasn't that way. I think it's part of it as an audience, our expectations as audience members.
I will say this, and this because I had, after I watched the movie, I knew this. I had to say this.
Kill your darlings. Kill your darlings.
No. The acting in this carried the day. I enjoyed it because they were so good, and I believed them, and they were compelling. But I was left at the end asking, why did you make this movie? Because what they did was they took a very common situation that we've seen a million times before, and they did nothing new with it. And that, that always takes away from me because then it feels like an exercise, which now you're kind of telling me it sort
is
of
an
was,
exercise,
right?
yeah. I mean, the point is that they're putting these stringent rules on themselves. And I mean, as somebody who's a huge fan of Dogma 95, Festin, which is the first Dogma 95 movie ever made, I think is one of the best films ever made of all time. And they have all these rules that they've imposed on themselves. And I think it does. Yeah. There's a nexus between that and reality. You know what I mean?
What is that Danish film? I think it's a Danish film, Celebration.
Yeah,
Celebration.
that's Festin. That's the one I'm talking about.
Okay, that's a brilliant movie.
It's brilliant.
Right? So they imposed all these rules on themselves,
Dogma 95.
and they still were able to do something that added to the canon, right? These guys added nothing to the canon. So you can impose all the rules you want on yourself, and you can do this artificial thing, and that's fine. But you still have to bring something new to the story that we've seen a million times.
Well, what I think might have been the issue was that it was audience manipulation. It wasn't character manipulation. So it wasn't like you weren't believing this necessarily from their point of view. You're believing it from an audience member. Like all of a sudden, you're what you thought was going to happen, didn't or whatever.
Right.
So I thought that was kind of a cheap. That makes it cheaper almost.
Yeah. Agree that the medium, these rules you could find creative ways to toy with the restrictions probably a little bit more than they did. Final film, Room 55, directed by Rose Glass, which is probably a made-up name, just like Samuel French, maybe. Anyway, it's written by rose-colored glasses and Sarah Gordon, and it's starring Charlotte Weston in the main role as Alice. The story is sort of a Julia Child-esque female chef celebrity that gets embroiled in a dark, sexy hotel world. And so Kevin, why don't you tell us why you chose this one?
I don't know. I mean, the movie just makes me giggle on so many levels because there's just so many little cute moments where you could tell they were having fun with, I don't know, they were playing with genre conventions, and there were all sorts of weird misdirects, and it was just a lot of fun. I mean, you kind of think it starts as you think it's going to be one movie, right? You think it's going to be this weird Julia Child thing, and then it turns into something else, and you think it's going to be a Psycho movie, and then it totally changes into something else, which is the most interesting choice of the three. And I just had fun. I mean, it's one of those movies when it's not particularly about anything profound, but it's another beautifully shot movie, really well executed, and it's just a lot of fun to sort of piece the puzzle together and watch this woman, go through this journey.
What do you think that the meaning of ropes and strings was throughout? Seemed to be a theme.
Well, I think she was kind of a puppet, right? And I think that her whole world was very strict, and she was always constantly worrying about things. And then the second what happened, her whole world kind of opened up.
Wait, can I be Kevin? I'm gonna explain the joke. She's high strung.
She is.
No,
because remember,
No,
she's stringing the meat, and then she gets strung up herself and put in the.
Well, I think she's pretty restricted in her life.
Well, you even have that moment where on TV she's watching herself tie the meat, and she's tying herself into a robe. Right. So you have that moment where the string would be taut on the meat, and you just see this close-up. And I actually didn't get the redirects that you seem to have found, because I don't know, maybe it's just the way I watch things, but I'm constantly translating it into like how I would write it. And there's all these from go, it's lingering close-ups on lips, on hands. It's very almost erotic to start with. Or at least sensual.
But we don't know at that point what the reason for that, the erotic visual.
I mean, at least, that's a just as valid of a response to it. You know what I mean? Like, to me, that was making me nervous, right? Those close-ups I wasn't responding to, this is a sensual thing.
So Maria, you thought that was sensual thing from the beginning.
Oh yeah.
Really? That's interesting, because I also felt the way that these guys did that was horror. I thought something terrible was going to happen.
See, he thinks when things look bad things will happen. You guys think, oh man, there's some close-ups on that chick's lips and fingers. We're definitely going to see her die.
Yeah, exactly.
I think, by the way, I think that the thing with the rope was a little bit of irony, right? Because it's almost like it's saying, being tied up can go both ways, right? It can be a restrictive thing or a very freeing thing.
That's why it's interesting, because she, in a way, she wants to break free of her bounds, and she does it by getting tied up. So it's kind of this strange juxtaposition.
Right. It's control.
Let's
though.
talk
I think it comes
about
out of control.
and loss of control, right? So that's what I wanted to kind of talk about next is what is with 50 Shades of Grey, this sort of new thing in our pop culture that is. We're at a height of feminism, but at the same time, we seem to be at the height of, domination.
Is it a new thing?
Yeah, I don't think it's a new
I think
thing.
it's your exposure to it is new because it's become mainstream. But this is something that's been around for fucking ever.
But why did it become mainstream is what I'm asking.
I think it's become mainstream partially because of feminism. Because you have women who are more willing to talk about what they're into and a lot less shame about it. And that's why you get things like soccer mom porn, like 50 Shades of Grey, which is not well-written erotica, not actually BDSM. But because of that, you end up seeing more of it. And because it's just starting out, we're still seeing like very ham-fisted versions of it.
Yeah.
This, while it's beautiful, and it's definitely the best visual I've ever seen of suspension play, I don't think that I would say that this is like good BDSM. I mean, it's under negotiated kink, like there's not really, no one talks about it beforehand.
Right.
So it's not, but it works for the story they're telling, and it works for what's going on. Tonally, it's great.
Yeah, I mean, look at the film.
We're not going to talk about under negotiated kink. We have to talk about what does that mean.
Well,
you go ahead. You know way more than I know what you mean, but you know way more than I do.
So in BDSM, there's like two general ways of going about things. You have SSC, which is safe, sane, and consensual, and you have RACK, R-A-C-K, which is risk-aware consensual kink. And either way, you're supposed to talk through what's going to happen before you do it. Whereas in this, the chick just walks in and she's like, I don't know, I don't really. And another chick is like, no, come over here. At least she says please, like that's nice, but she doesn't go through and say like, don't be worried, this is what we're gonna do, here are all the safeties that are in place. Like it's a very controlled thing.
Ultimately, won't the fantasy...
I wonder if they actually filmed that and then just for dramatic purposes decided not to put it in. Because that's one of those things that might not play really well on screen.
I don't think they would have even filmed it. Like I said, it makes sense for the story and the tone, the way they're doing it. But it's something that you don't really see on camera because it's not the sexy part of BDSM.
Yeah, no, that's the very non-sexy part of it. So the fantasy, though, and we'll end with this question, isn't the fantasy ultimately never fulfilled as long as there's this element of unsexiness, of this unsexy consent element? Because the fantasy seems to be utter loss of control, right?
I mean, you're still giving up your control if you've talked things through, but then you don't have that like sharp spike of adrenaline of I'm actually going to die right now. Like her thing was obviously letting go of control and being able to relax. Like that's why you've got the same visual as her immersing herself in the bath. But just like in the bath, she could surface whenever she wanted. If you don't talk things through first, you've got that fear of, well, they're just going to hold me underwater till I drown.
That's all the time we have for today. We have a few announcements before we start talking to Toby about what he has going on. Lots of exciting things, as always, for Toby. We're turning Short on Shorts into a podcast that's going to be available on iTunes and SoundCloud and our website. That should be out in the next month or so. We also have another show that I'm not sure if you guys have seen called Gatekeepers, which is also available on our website and will soon be available in podcast form as well. In that show, we interview famous or powerful or successful people throughout the entertainment industry about their experiences therein. Before we leave, Toby Louie, what do you have going on in your world?
So I produce, I direct, I write, but I've been kind of more on the producer path recently. And I just finished producing a movie that was at South by Southwest called Night Owls, directed by Charles Hood. And we're in the process of selling that movie right now. And then Charles and I are going to be working on a new movie called Sorry for Your Loss, which is going to hopefully start up soon. It's always a mystery when these indies get going. But hopefully very soon. And then I'm working on another indie project with Ben Epstein, who created a show called Happy Land, and it was on MTV for a season. And he's a great writer, and he sent me a script, and so we're going to start getting that one going. A couple other projects. I'm working on a music video that I'm directing for this band called Alakazam, which is actually Sal Masakela's company. Band, not company. And I don't know if you guys know Sal Masakela, but he was like the X Games guru. He was the personality on the sidelines, used to interview Tony Hawk after he came off his runs. And he found music recently, and his dad's always been into music. His dad's Hugh Masakela, and so I'm teaming up with him to make his next music video. So just kind of have a lot of different things brewing, which I think is the only way that you can succeed in this business.
Very, cool. Very prolific stuff. Thank you, Toby, for being on the show.
Cool, thanks for having me.
Kevin, did you see Night Owls? Did you hear about Night Owls at South by Southwest?
It's a feature? Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I wouldn't have seen it.
Are you sure?
I'm positive because I only saw shorts.
Oh,
I saw every single short
cool.
at South by, but I did not go to any of the features, unfortunately.
Well, being at the festival, if you have a film in the festival, it's never you can never see everything. I mean,
Right.
I saw like maybe 2 movies. You're working the whole time.
Oh no, totally.
So
I say this all the time. I have so much more fun at festivals
when you're not in
when
yeah.
I don't have a film there.
Yeah.
Because you're free to just do whatever you want and see tons of movies and meet lots of people. When you have your own film there, there's this obligation to go to the screenings of that and promote it and talk to people about it, and I don't know, the whole experience is a little bit more restrictive, I guess.
Sounds like one of those good problems.
Yeah, it's definitely a good problem.
Yeah, it is. But it also,
problem.
you have to pay all this money to go, and then you end up seeing your film 3,000 times, and you're like, I've already seen that. I don't want to see this.
And how much selling is there? I mean, how much do you guys really have to like try and sell all the time?
I mean, usually it depends on shorts versus features are different, but usually you bring a sales agent with you and they negotiate a lot of that stuff. But a lot of times the festival isn't actually where the sale takes place. It usually takes place after the festival or it takes place before, and they announce at the festival. Right. So it's rare that you would have an actual negotiation during this festival, unless it's like the hottest. I think Mural and the Dying Girl probably. I mean that. My guess is they probably had that in place well before, but I'm sure there was some negotiating and bidding wars going on during.
Yeah, if you're fortunate enough that you have a sales agent, you're not really selling in the way I think you mean. You're just talking about your film and
with people,
trying to spread the word about it, but someone else is taking care of all of that other stuff.
And as a producer, you're just looking for your next project. So I was spending a lot of time trying to pitch people on the next movie that we wanted to do, because that was
So more selling yourself.
more selling, yourself and your team and the projects that you have coming.
Yeah.
Rough life these guys got, going to film festivals all around the country all the time. It's really hard. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for interneting or podcasting in. Join us in 2 more weeks for the next episodes of Short on Shorts.
Bye.